Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Super Fanboy Guy, and I'm here with my host Jacob Wheeler. Jacob, how you doing today?
Good man, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good, and I'm excited to announce that we finally came up with a title for our podcast, and we decided to be called the Golden Guardians, and we are a podcast based on bringing you decks for the Versus System card game in the Golden Age format. And what we do on this podcast is we talk about the competitive deck strategies and cards that are used in the Golden Age format. And if you tune in with us on the first episode or the pilot episode, we were talking about the Mega City deck and talking about some of the strategies to it, what was in the deck, and that kind of stuff. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite decks of all time. If anybody who knows me, I'm a big Spider Man fan. And today we are going to talk about the Spider Friends deck, also known as the Spider Stall deck. Now, if any of you have seen my YouTube channel, I actually did a what's called a Silver Age or Bring Your Own Set Spider Friends deck profile. So make sure you check that out if you want to get an idea of some of the cards that are a little bit different. But today we're going to be focusing on Golden Age, the Spider Stall deck. And we actually have two different variations of the deck to show you today. Jacob is going to show us his build of his Spider Stall deck, and then I'm going to go over my deck as well. But we have a lot of the same cards, so we're not. When it comes to me, I'm just going to talk about the cards that are different from my deck than Jacob's deck, and actually the kind of give you all kind of a history of the Spider Friends team affiliation. Is they came out in about Web of Spider-Man, which was the second Marvel set, if I remember. Does that sound right, Jake?
Yeah, it was the second Marvel set.
Okay, right. And so, but they didn't really. They had some decent cards, but not enough to really make like a decent deck. And then when Marvel Team Up came out, that was like a big game changer because you started getting cards like, the 4-drop Spider Man, the one that pays the 7 attack to exhaust a 3-drop. You got Spider Man Stark Protege. You got, a lot of the plot twist support like Indebted, Gift Wrapped, and those kind of cards. But then the deck really, really became good once we got like the Spider-Man Ultimates card and the Spider-Man Zombie card. And so I just recently built the deck on Sunday, which is about 5 days ago. So I've been kind of play testing it by myself to see like what are the combos. But I know you've also played your version of the deck many times before, right?
Yeah. This is next to Mega City. This is another one of my favorite decks to play. I think it's very good, very very good in Golden Age.
Yeah, so just to talk briefly about the decks before we go into the full deck profile. So what the strategy is a lot of the Spider-Man cards have abilities that make you exhaust your opponent's characters. The idea is to stall quotation marks to the later turns so that you're able to play like powerful cards on turn 8 or turn 9 and maybe even turn 7 on certain decks. But we're going to kind of go over those now in the deck profile. So I don't know. Before we get started, Jake, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, listeners, just kind of prepare yourself because there's going to be a lot of controversial talking points in some of the decisions for the decks and some of the theory and philosophy that's going to go into how we approach Golden Age with just Spider Stall, or at least how I approach it. So yeah, I mean, just bear with us and keep listening. I think you're going to really like this episode.
Okay, great. And also another thing I forgot to mention too is my deck has been a build that's already been online, and I'm what I'm planning to do is I'm going to go over that deck when it comes to my turn. But I think Jake, your Spider Friends deck profile this is kind of like your own brew of it, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
It's definitely yeah. I think some of the deck choices are unique. They're not brand new in the sense that like it's just my choices and no one else has done this before. But through all of my testing, I really try and whittle down the Golden Age decks that I like. That's among those top 10 decks. I really try and like min max all of my decisions to be the most efficient plays possible. So yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think that's all we got here. So let's just get straight into the deck profiles.
Okay, guys, let's jump right into this Spider Stall deck. I really enjoy this deck, and I think you guys will too. So let's go on to the characters. We're going to start with our one drops, and there's only 4 copies of a one drop here, and that's Aunt May, and she was featured in the Mega City deck. You can discard a character card rather than pay Aunt May's recruit cost, and when she enters play, you can search your deck for a card named Spider-Man and put it into your hand.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention about Aunt May Golden Oldie as well is that, I mean, yeah, she's a 0/1, so she doesn't really attack for much, but she's definitely one of the cards in Marvel Team Up that made Spider Friends more consistent because with the ability to, essentially search for a card named Spider-Man, if you play her on turn 1 for an example and you play her and then you get to search for any Spider-Man, well, that pretty much pays for herself if essentially. So it's like you get your card back when you play her. And even if you have to discard a character card to pay her recruit cost, it's like she's kind of like a mobilize or a search card for a Spider-Man card, which is could be really helpful.
Definitely, and that's almost a must, especially in Golden Age for sure. Let's move on to the 2 drops. We have 1 copy of Black Cat, Master Thief, and she has evasion, and she's from the Web of Spider-Man set. The plot twist that your opponent costs 2 more to play. And this is going to be super important when we're dealing with omnipotence or pathetic attempt or anything like that. Having that Black Cat on board, especially in Golden Age, can really get you out of some tough situations if you kind of know what you're looking at.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add about her is she does have invasion, so you can evade her and then she'll recover at the start of the recovery phase. I know it kind of like it defeats the purpose of having her out, but at least, because if you evade her, they can play their plot twist at that point. That's the only thing that's kind of iffy about her, but, besides that, she's still a great card.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel like she should only be like a one of is because she's so situational in that aspect.
Right.
Um, yeah, most plot twists when the opponent, if it's important enough, they're going to either negate Black Cat's effect or they're going to do combat first. And so omnipotence and maybe enemy of my enemy and stuff like that.
Right.
Sometimes that'll come in clutch, like in the moment, but oftentimes with important plot twists, they just stun Black Cat and then just move on with what their plan was.
Right. Yeah.
Puppet Master is going to be our main slot for our 2 drop. And in my opinion, Puppet Master is one of the strongest stall cards in Golden Age. I think Puppet Master is so good. And actually, Puppet Master is going to define our 3 drop later. And
Okay.
whether or not you have Puppet Master in the deck, I feel like really determines what version of Spider Stall that you're playing. But I really, really enjoy Puppet Master. Puppet Master is actually going to be the key to winning almost every game. Puppet Master is so, so important. So essentially, what it does is when you exhaust Puppet Master, your opponent has to exhaust a readied character that he controls. This is going to be really important because Puppet Master is actually going to be our main
Exhaust
targeted.
engine.
Yeah, it's going to
Right.
be our main exhaust engine. Yeah, because we're going to use all of our other characters to exhaust everybody else. And then Puppet Master is going to be our on turn exhaustion. So no matter what turn you're on, whether it's turn 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, Puppet Master, the plan is to have Puppet Master exhaust that cost character, depending on what turn you're on. So you save him last, no matter what.
And then a thing that I want to mention about Puppet Master, Philip Masters also, is what's really nice about him. Let's say it's turn 2 and your opponent hasn't played anything on turn 1 or even on turn 2. And now their first character that they recruit in the game is on turn 3. Well, if you recruit this Puppet Master out, you're already exhausting their 3 drop, which is huge in this game. And the other thing that I do want to mention that the I think the disadvantage of having this Puppet Master is he has no team affiliation. So the problem that I see with him, if he stays like on turn 7 or turn 8, he is vulnerable to like somebody attacking him and you taking a bunch of damage.
He is.
That's the only
Yeah.
downside that I really find with him. And he's a 0/2 and he can't obviously hit back anybody. But I mean, for what you get in the ability, I think definitely makes up for, his other disadvantages.
It does, and that one weakness is actually one of the things that if your opponent can bust through, like what we're trying to build up, and hit Puppet Master with like a flighted character,
Right.
and that's one of the ways that Mega City can actually beat Spider Stalls to kind of break through with like a really well timed like Pathetic Attempt or Omnipotence and just dump all those power ups into one character and send it into Puppet Master. And then you
Right.
just automatically lose, which is why we have to build the whole deck from this point forward around making sure that Puppet Master doesn't get attacked and then having an end game like win condition.
Right.
Which brings us to our 3-drop. And
Now,
this
when you showed me this card, I was like, "Oh man, this is a spicy card to put in here." So I'm actually really excited for you to talk about this card.
Oh man, people are gonna get so mad over this deck choice,
Yeah.
because I ideally you want one of the most expensive cards that Spider Friends can have, but our 3-drop is actually Cardiac from Marvel Web of Spider-Man. What Cardiac does is he's a 3/2 with flight and range, super low stats for a 3-drop, but you can activate him and stun target character with a cost of 2 or less and opponent controls. And so what this is going to do is when I go to stun the 2-drop with Cardiac, Puppet Master is going to be ready to exhaust the on turn 3-drop.
Right, and that's what I kind of found interesting about you playing the Cardiac is, yeah, let's say they on turn 2 they recruit a 2-drop, and on turn 3 they recruit a 3-drop. Well, you activate Cardiac to stun the 2-drop, and then you activate Puppet Master if you have them to exhaust their 3-drop.
Absolutely. And so now that takes us to our 4-drops, and that's just going to be Spider-Man, the sensational Spider-Man from Marvel Team Up. This is going to be
Now wait, Jake, before you go there, I just
yeah,
want to also mention one more thing about Cardiac.
yeah.
He also does have another ability. It's activate recover target Spider Friends character with a cost 2 or less you control. Now, obviously, the only targets in this deck are Aunt May and Black Cat, so that ability is really not relevant at all.
It is, and I can tell you this: Cardiac, no matter what, like no one would be able to dispute Cardiac if Puppet Master was a Spider Friends character. If
Yeah,
we could, if he had the Spider Friends affiliation, this deck would be so busted. I mean, it would be forced. I think that Puppet Master would be forced to be put on some type of restricted or ban list by a long time ago if he was a Spider Friends character.
Oh yeah, and then here's another funny thing. So I have a group of friends that I play with, and sometimes we play multiplayer, like a free for all.
Uh
So
huh.
if you're playing, or either like we do multiplayer, but if you do like a 2-headed mutant or whatever, you can actually activate his second ability on somebody else's Spider Friends. So if it's like an important Spider Friends 2-drop, like if it's the let's say the Blade from Marvel Team Up, and somebody has him stunned, for an example, you can actually activate it to recover him, and you can start playing like dirty politics with people in a multiplayer game.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
because it doesn't say target a Spider Friends character you control, it just says a Spider Friends character in general.
Oh
So
yeah, that's right. That's really
so
interesting.
so
That is.
I just wanted to add that because I thought it would be funny.
Yeah, yeah. That is super interesting.
So I'm sorry, you're going to your
No,
four
you're all
drops
right.
now.
Yeah. So the sensational Spider-Man, this is a 4-drop from Marvel Team Up. He's got substitute. So if you're not too sure what substitute is, you can basically take somebody that is the same cost. I believe it's the same cost or higher, right? But not the same
Substitute
cost or lower.
has to be cost. Well, so if you have like this 4-drop, you can substitute a yeah. So if you have like a 5-drop out, you can substitute it out for him.
Yeah, so it should be the same cost or higher, and
Right.
essentially what it says is you can remove from the game the character in play that you're substituting out for somebody that has the substitute keyword in its text. He's actually really interesting, and I think that he's probably going to be the best in slot no matter what build you're making, because 7/7 with range, right? It's got substitute, and you can pay 7 attack. Now this doesn't mean exhaust, just pay 7 attack. So he's still going to be a 0/7 for the turn. So you pay 7 attack this turn, and you exhaust target character with a cost of 3 or less. You can only obviously do if you have another Spider Friends character. What's really interesting with him is there's been a lot of matchups, like clutch matchups, where I've actually used the effect, paid 7 attack, and substituted out the OG, like that Spider-Man for another copy. and then paid 7 attack again to exhaust another character with a cost of 3 or less.
Right, and I love this Spider-Man personally. I have him in my Bring Your Own Set Spider Friends deck, and yeah, he's again another one of the big game changers because he is just like you said, you could pay 7 attack, then if you have another one, substitute him in. And the other thing you could also do is if it's your initiative, if you see the opportunity, you can like declare an attack with him and then pay the 7 attack after he's attacked to exhaust
Absolutely.
somebody. So
Absolutely.
and the thing that I try to like, and also I just want to mention with him, he says exhaust target character will cost 3 or less. Doesn't say it has to be visible or hidden, so you can exhaust hidden characters with his effect as well. If
You can. Yep.
hidden
Yeah.
or well hit, I maybe hit hidden characters maybe a couple times, but mostly I hit visible characters. But you might have the opportunity, like if there's some kind of weird like I don't know, like a Teen Titans deck that has concealed characters and they need the team attack for like their effects or something like that. You know,
Right.
you can do that, but I don't think I think Brave and the Bold is like the only Teen Titans deck that's out there, unless there's a modern age one too.
Yeah, there's I think that the option of knowing that you can target something hidden is invaluable information for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
because there's a couple of cards that say there's a couple of Spider Friends cards that do like say only visible characters. I forget which one it was, but anyway. So yeah,
um,
he's still a great card though.
yeah, definitely. And what's really interesting is now, like, we're gonna start to see a pattern here. So now, what are we, on turn 4, right?
Yeah.
So Cardiac is now stunning the 2-drop. Spider-Man is now exhausting the 3-drop, and the only thing that's left on your opponent's board typically is going to be the 4-drop, which Puppet Master now forces your opponent to exhaust.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it for the 4-cost characters. We'll go ahead and move on to the 5-cost. Firestar Hot Stuff. I think that this is a really good silver bullet card. Meaning that if your opponent's playing a certain deck, you can actually use Firestar's effect and almost completely seal the matchup for you. Firestar Hot Stuff's from Web of Spider-Man. She has loyalty. Essentially, what you do is you just activate and you stun each character with a cost of 2 or less on the board.
AKA, she's also known as Flame Trap on a stick.
She is. She is.
Except
Flame
you
Trap
don't have
on
to
a stick.
discard 2 cards.
Right, right. Yeah, Flame Trap without the downside, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And especially in situations where, like, against really hardcore, like, aggro decks that are playing, like, multiple, like, lower drop characters on turns 3 and 4, Puppet Master kind of becomes useless. Puppet Master's great when the opponent's on curve. It's playing, like, 1 character a turn. Puppet Master really shines. But against really crazy aggro decks, he's not the best in the world. So Firestar really bridges that gap, in my opinion.
I mean, the one thing that I just imagine is, I don't know, is the Shield Burn deck a thing in Golden Age?
It is actually.
So
People, it's so popular, yeah.
there you go. That's Firestar is good for that deck, I would assume.
Definitely.
It just gets hurt.
And a lot of times, you're not going to be grinding out this day and age. You're not going to be grinding out like competitions like every 3 months or anything like that. So this is mostly like, the most exposure you're going to get is online play and then tabletop play with your friends. And most people bring things like, X Faces and decks like Xbox and like stuff like that, where it's like really low cost aggro decks, and you're going to have to deal with that or you're going to lose for sure.
Right.
And our next 5-drop is going to be Spider-Man Secret Avenger. It's really important to have negation abilities on a stick for you to use. Honestly, Spider-Man Secret Avenger, there's 2 reasons, and we're going to get to the other reason when we hit our 7 drops. But the main reason why we're playing Spider-Man Secret Avenger is for that negation effect, which we covered in the Mega City podcast. But I'll go over it one more time. He's an Avengers Spider Friends character from Marvel Universe. He's got loyalty. When you have 2 affiliations with loyalty, and some of you guys may not know this, unless it specifically says dual loyalty, you just need either or. So you need Spider Friends or an Avengers character on the board. And this is going to be important later on when we talk about our 7 and 8 drop. You can discard a character card and target opposing character loses and can't have powers and keywords this turn, and you can only use it once a turn. And he's a 9/10, 10 defense. That's pretty good for a 5-drop. Your average 5-drop is like a 9/9. So if he trades with an average 5-drop, he's actually going to win in combat.
Yeah, because he's got a bigger booty.
So yeah, man. I mean, moving on to our
Now,
6.
let me add something about the five
Yeah,
drop
what's up?
Spider-Man. Now, the other thing is like, he's just always been a great card. He's just been a staple. And there's actually been a few times where, let's say you've drawn all character cards. Well, he also does have reservists, so you can put him in your resource row and recruit him later too, which could be relevant. You know, and
Absolutely.
I feel like he should be like a staple in all decks, like at least one copy of, just because that effect is just so good to negate, you know, powers and keywords for the turn. Like that could be huge, you know.
It's mandatory in my opinion. Like when you're
Yeah.
playing Golden Age, you have to have something like that. Most people just opt for 4 omnipotence, but you can spread it out, any way you want. But yes,
Right.
any most of the time your 5-drop is dedicated to some type of character negation ability.
Right.
We're at the point now where we're playing Spider-Man on turn 4 and then
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man on turn 5, right? And the idea behind this is you obviously want to choose odds. I'll tell you why here in a little bit, but the idea behind this is because Spider-Man can actually trade with another 5-drop, just 1-for-1. You're still on the stall path. So the Spider-Man trades, and now you have the sensational Spider-Man will exhaust the 3-drop, cardiac stuns the 2-drop. The only thing that's left that's not either stunned or exhausted on your opponent's board is the 4-drop, just like last turn, which Puppet Master takes care of. Now we can turn around and we can move to and remember the 4-drop is now the only thing that's left over, right? That's the only thing
Right.
that remains unchecked, which really takes our 6-drop to only one option. And we're playing multiple Spider-Mans. So Scarlet Spider, Ben Riley, we have 2 copies of this. He's an emergency 6-drop, but you really shouldn't be playing him. You should be using him for his effect. So you can reveal him from your hand, and characters named Spider-Man you control aren't unique this turn, which means that you can play your other Spider-Man without evoking the uniqueness check. The actual he also has another ability where he gives other Spider-Friend attackers +2 attack. And that's kind of cool. And in other versions of the deck, it's really good. But in this one, we're just going to use him so that we can play multiple Spider-Man. And I just want to mention one more time, going back to that 4-drop character that remains unchecked. So we've got a 4-drop character, and your opponent is now playing a 6-drop character.
Mm-hmm.
So really, the best option, in my opinion, for a 6-drop is Spider-Man Outlaw from Marvel Legends.
Oh
You're going to be
yeah, I
playing,
remember that
yeah,
guy.
you're going to be playing him more often than not. Now he's not a Spider Friends character; he's a Marvel Knights character, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, that's yeah, that's important to note for sure.
Yeah, but you can activate him and you can exhaust target character with a cost of 4 or less, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
covers the 4-drop from last turn, which only leaves your 6-drop. Which Puppet Master didn't have to exhaust the 4-drop. So now Puppet Master actually exhausts your opponent's 6-drop, and you've locked
Oh.
down the board once again.
Oh, that's really good. And going back to the Scarlet Spider for a second, so I just want to say, out of all the cards in the game that make characters non-unique, so what do we have? We have Clash of Worlds, we have Cadmus Labs, we have, if you want to go that route, you could do Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah, it's a
That
popular one
that one.
amongst.
But
Yeah,
I feel that the Scarlet Spider card is probably the most consistent out of all the cards that make characters non-unique. Because all you have to do is reveal from your hand. You don't have to have it on the field where they can, replace it or do something with it. You just reveal, and they're not unique. Now, also keep note that when you, oh yeah, the other card I was thinking about is, of course, the Superman Red, the one that pay 1 endurance and
oh
characters
yeah,
named,
I forgot about him.
yeah,
Yeah,
and the characters named Superman are not unique this turn. Now, remember with Scarlet Spider, it says characters named Spider-Man are not unique this turn, not your characters named Spider-Man. So if you're playing against the mirror match deck, I mean, in theory, they could play their Spider-Man without it being unique as well. And I think that's
it
a lot of
definitely, yeah, and
things that people don't really catch.
yeah, and it turns into a poker match. Like who has the Scarlet Spider on turn 5 to make them non-unique, and sometimes
The Scarlet,
and I,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's funny so
Or
that the
even
opponent can
earlier,
play
yeah.
off of it. Yeah,
I just realized when you meant turn 5 because you play Spider-Man on turn 4 and then play him on turn 5.
Oh, right, because because of cardiac, yeah, definitely, and we'll go into that a little bit later too. The 6-drop Spider-Man, I feel like, is one of the best options for these situations because the opponent's board is locked down, and you can't get much better than that. Moving on to our 7-drops, I think that this is one of the more broken Spider-Man characters in the game. Even after all of the support and everything, this guy easily makes my top 5 list, and that's going to be a 1 copy of Spider-Man: The Amazing Spider-Man from Marvel Web of Spider-Man.
Also, I think he was in like the first Web Spider-Man starter deck. Like I
He was,
remember him in the packaging. Like that's the first card you saw in the package was him. So maybe it was a sign of how good he was supposed to be or something. I don't know.
He is, and to be honest, like he's like even back in the day when the Web of Spider-Man was first released, we saw him play like competitively as like a 4 of. Like there was 4 copies of him with like what's that card? It's like a unstable mutation. Is that the name of the card? Where you can
Which one?
unstable mutation. I think it's like you get to take the top card of your deck and put it into the graveyard, and then you can, or the discard pile, and then you can give one of your characters like plus X attack, where X is its cost.
Oh yeah, that's the 6-arm Spidey picture, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
in Web of Spider-Man. Yeah, and so like one of those decks, I remember like it placed first place. One of those decks ran like 4 of the Amazing Spider-Man and like 2 or 3 of the 8-drop Cosmic Spider-Man, and then like 3 or 4 Ezekiel, like the really garbage like common.
Oh yeah, the when he comes to play, you draw a card for each Spider Friends character you control.
Yeah, which to be honest, this day and
Uh,
age doesn't really seem too bad of a card. Back then it was awful, but this day and age, the card draw kind of seems nice if you can swing it.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like there's so much stuff you can put in the 7-drop slot that's better than him. That's gonna, I don't know.
True. No, you're right. Yeah, true. He's definitely one of the lesser choices, but the card draw is really appealing, in my opinion.
Right.
But I guess I never really talked about what the Amazing Spider-Man does. Most of you should know if you've played Versus, but you can discard a Spider Friends character card from your hand and exhaust target character that has a cost less than or equal to the character that you're targeting, and that's super important for a couple reasons. But the main reason why it's important is because there's no cap to how many times you can actually do this.
Oh yeah, that's true. It's not like a once per turn ability.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't say so on the card. You can spam this thing to Kingdom Come, and it's pretty cool. Which is why we actually have another 7-drop in the list. That's going to be Spider-Man Stark's protege. He's
What
really good too.
one of my favorite 7-drop Spidey cards ever.
Yeah, he's pretty good. So he's a Spider Friends and Avengers character, and that's going to be important as well as we move into our 8-drop. But he's got loyalty, so you either need to have a Spider Friends character, which you will by now, or an Avengers character. And it's important to note that the 5-drop Spider Man is an Avengers and Spider Friends character as well. And he's a 16/16 with flight and range, so he's beefy in that sense. You can pay X amount of attack, X being the variable, so you can choose to pay 16 attack, and you can exhaust target character with a cost of whatever you paid. So, if it's 16, you can exhaust a character that costs 16 or less.
Yeah, and also one thing I do want to mention with him too, that his ability is not during the combat phase, so you can do it during the recruit step.
Yes.
I mean, and then also him having flight and range can be relevant too, because you can attack like something small first, and then pay the attack to exhaust something after he's attacked.
Or
Too.
vice versa, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fact that he doesn't exhaust, I feel like, is so broken. And what's super crazy is you can discard Stark's protege to the Amazing Spider-Man,
Okay.
and then you can use some type of recursion effect to bring back your 7-drop, and then discard again to exhaust like either another 7-drop on like turn 8 or something,
Okay.
or just a 6-drop,
Gotcha.
which continues that curve of like Puppet Master and everybody exhausting.
Right.
By this point, if you've properly played everything in order, your opponent should not have been able to touch you with anything but a 1-drop character. Ideally, and most decks don't really run 1-drops, and most of the time when you're mulliganing and things like that, having the 1-drop isn't on your priority list. So I want to say about 70% of the time your 1-drop isn't really even going to come out. You know,
Right.
it's more of a luck base unless you have some crazy tutor effects. Your opponent really shouldn't have been able to do much to you, and you should have at least above 30 endurance by this point. And so, I'll go ahead and move on to the Sentry because we talked about loyalty and Avengers, and like there's really no reason to do this in a Spider Friends deck, but the Sentry is a very, very good character. It's an 8 drop, and I believe it's from Marvel Universe, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so he's Shield and Avengers, but he's not Spider Friends. And this is important because Spider Man, the 5 drop that we should be playing every game, is Avengers. So we can actually fuel this loyalty. And if for some reason the Spider Man 5 drop goes away, Stark's protege is Avengers as well. Yeah,
So
so
that's
when.
that the Avengers on the 5 drop Spider-Man and the Avengers on the 7 drop Spider-Man kind of help you play the Sentry, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
Okay, gotcha.
And so what the Sentry does is you can activate him, remove him from the game, and you can remove an 8 drop. I believe it's an 8 drop character from the game. Is it any character?
I thought it was any character. If I
Yeah,
remember
it
correctly.
may be any character. So you can
Well,
you might be able to hit a
well,
7 drop.
fortunately, I have my desktop open, so let me just read the card really quick. Okay, Sentry remove target character from the game at the start of the recovery phase.
Oh, that's so good.
Return Sentry.
That's so good.
Sorry,
And so
sorry, I didn't mean
yeah,
to take the spotlight from
no,
you.
you're fine. You're fine. So good, man. I'm telling you, like just nuking away an 8 drop. But this is the crazy part. So it says that the Sentry comes back, but it says nothing about the 8 drop that you removed coming back.
Right.
This is something that people think like, because we're kind of blinking them out and they're both going to come back in. No, only the Sentry comes back in. So the other guy just stays removed from the game, which is broken. So good. One of the best 8 drops in Versus, in my opinion.
Okay, so I have a quick story to tell you about the Sentry for a second. So I was playing a game with my buddy Mark, and I believe I was playing my Arkham Insanity deck, and he was playing, I think he was playing like if I remember correctly, he was playing like the Radioactive Man Shield build, and we come to turn 8, and he plays this, and I think I had like the 8 drop Batmite out, and I think he removed him, or it was either the 6 drop Joker that I had. I forget which one it was. He goes to remove him, and then I flip over Pathetic Attempt, and he removed his Sentry for nothing. So it made me win the game because of that. And an Insanity deck, obviously, you can only have 1 copy of each card. So my 1 copy of Pathetic Attempt, I had, and I didn't see, and I had it like since the beginning of the game, and I didn't have an opportunity to use it until he activated his Sentry ability.
Oh, that's so good. Pathetic Attempt. It gets a lot of hate, but Pathetic Attempt is such a good card. It's so mandatory with all the shenanigans going on.
The only thing I hate about Pathetic Attempt is it never came out foil.
Yes.
Because that Galactus starter, they never had any of the foils like on Omnipotence, Pathetic Attempt, all that stuff.
I wish I had a playset of legitimate foil Pathetic Attempts and Omnipotence if they existed, but unfortunately they don't. So yeah, so Sentry is really good, and we talked about everything else. If you really follow this curve, even Sentry up to this point, man, like your opponent should really have a hard time getting through with just the characters. This isn't even mentioning any of the plot twists, right? But here's our kill turn, and I have this rule in Versus: you have to have a win condition. If you don't have a win condition, don't build the deck. You're just wasting your time, right? Unless you're playing to have fun. If you're playing to have fun, and really that's what this whole game is about, is having a good time.
Right.
But to appeal to the more competitive players, that's my advice. Like, you have to have a win condition. Galactus is so good here. Galactus it's a 9 drop, right? He doesn't need to be Spider Friends or anything because you should just win the game when he gets played, right? Especially in tabletop decks where like your friends don't believe in running Pathetic Attempt or Omnipotence. This is really where Galactus shines. He's a 25/25, which matters a little bit, and we'll talk about why.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got flight and range, and when he comes into play, you gain endurance equal to target opponent's endurance total. And if you do, that player's endurance total becomes 0. So he's like a drain life, right? So he drains whatever endurance your opponent's at and just gives it to you.
Right. And the other thing, too, is that he also, I mean, he's just like you said, he's a finisher, right? And even, I mean, with the spider stall deck, you're stalling them and probably barely hitting them for damage. So at this point, they're probably going to still be at a high endurance total, probably like 45 or 50. So you just drain all of that from them, and of course, unless of course they have pathetic attempt, and then that just kind of ruins your plan.
Right. In which case you really have to like look around and really determine. And this is where omnipotence plays such a key role for competitive players.
Okay.
Understanding what to omnipotence, because omnipotencing and calling pathetic attempt is
Right.
typically the play because it takes it completely out of, nothing can be pathetic attempted now. And since nothing can be pathetic attempted, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get in there and do your thing with Galactus. But man, Galactus is just, he's so good. And a lot of people, for some weird reason, don't know that you can pathetic attempt Galactus. I've seen
Yeah.
games where like they have a pathetic attempt in their hand and they just don't, it doesn't trigger with them that Galactus targets, which, is the whole key to playing pathetic attempt.
Right, and even if they pathetic attempt Galactus's ability, I mean, he could still you like with your Spider Friends characters, you can exhaust like all their stuff and then hit big with Galactus.
Yeah,
You
he's
know.
still, yeah, you can definitely isolate. And you mentioned about the opponent's endurance total being high by this point.
Hmm.
I've actually been in matchups playing against, Spider Stall where I'm doing well and things like that, and they decide to go on the offensive instead of the stall route, like
Hmm.
like around mid game, turns 5 through 8, and they whittled down my endurance total. So when they went to drop Galactus, my endurance total became 0, but they only gained like 10 endurance, and I still won the game
Oh
because
wow.
they chose not to touch me. Because if they can't deal with Galactus's effect, if you drain their life, all of a sudden your endurance total becomes 50 or above if you were, near death. And it's so hard for an aggro player to bridge that gap such late game. But if you're bashing them with your 7-drop Spider-Man, your 5-drop Spider-Man, you're fire starring the board and you're whittling them down, you Galactus, you've got nothing to gain life off of. And if they come in clutch with some crazy shenanigans late game, you could actually lose even after playing Galactus.
Right, and the other thing, Galactus has always been. This card has always been very popular since he was printed. I think he was printed in Heralds of Galactus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And he's just always been a popular character card. I have two Heralds of Galactus decks that play this card, and yeah, it's just like he just has. I mean, I actually think he's better than. I think the other 9-drop slot you would consider is the Onslaught from Marvel Origins that stuns all characters of a chosen team affiliation at the start of the combat phase, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But I mean,
Onslaught. I think what was it, like Star Coriander, the Starfire from oh man, what is it?
Legends.
Yeah, Legends. Yeah.
Oh yes, we'll get to her more in detail when we come to my deck
Okay,
profile.
I'm looking forward to that.
So,
That's gonna be cool. But yeah, I mean, Galactus is great, and honestly, like that's the basic situation for how you're going to exhaust. But notice it all relies on Puppet Master. Puppet
right.
Master. People don't understand Puppet Master is the glue that holds it together. And honestly, if you didn't have Puppet Master, I want to say every other turn you'd probably be facing somebody that's getting through with one character, and
Right.
all they have to do is chip away at your lowest cost and make you KO it, and slowly your rotation is just going to completely crumble. So
Right.
that's it. That's it for the characters. Unless you have anything else to add, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the locations.
No, I think that's good. I mean, I'll when we get to my deck profile, I'll kind of talk about some of the stuff about characters as well. But yeah, let's move on to locations.
Okay, so for our locations, we're gonna start with actually all of our locations are 2-cost locations. First on that list is going to be 4 copies of Empire State University. This is going to be your main card drawing engine. Getting to those plot twists are really important, but also making sure that you're drawing Puppet Master in combination with this combo that I'm about to tell you about is super important as well. So I've tried running Empire State University at less than 4 copies, and I just can't justify cutting them. They're so good. They pair with Aunt May so well. It's a 2-cost location. You can activate it and exhaust a Spider Friends character you control, and you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You can choose one of those cards to put into your hand and put the other card on the bottom. And this is super important because Most draw effects like this will tell you, dig for the top three and then, choose one to put in your hand. You have to discard a card though.
Yeah,
Empire
the
State
only one
Recursion
that I
never
think
had
about
that.
that doesn't make you discard a card is the I think it's called Democles Space from, I think it's Marvel Team Up, the one that you reveal the top, you name a card. I think it's you name a character card, reveal the top two, you take one. But if you name King, you look at the top three and take one.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a free one as well.
Oh, that's interesting. But yeah, there's not
Yeah.
too many of those. So when you do come across it, they're typically 4 copies in your deck because of the card advantage and how good they are.
Yeah, Empire State University is like a staple in any Spider Friends deck for sure.
I agree. I definitely agree. Next, we're going to come to our recursion locations. We have the full package. We're going to have 2 copies of Soul World. I know that you get pinged for 4 endurance, right? So it has Terraform. I don't know if you guys know what Terraform does, but you can take a face down resource. It doesn't have to be a location or plot list. So if a character got in there as an emergency or something, you can actually return it to your hand, and Soul World comes into play in its place. It's really good. I really like Terraform a lot.
Now, Terraform, you do have to reveal the card, obviously, right?
I was under the impression that with Terraform, it actually comes into play, like
Oh, okay.
face up. But I
Okay.
could be wrong. If it doesn't come into play face up, you do have to reveal it.
Okay,
Um,
I don't remember. I haven't used Terraform very much. Actually, I don't think I've used it at all since I've
oh,
played
okay.
it. I don't play like a League of Assassins deck or anything that really uses Terraform. Or the
Yeah,
I
for
have
sure.
an Inhumans deck, but I haven't really played it a whole lot. But
I've learned that as a general rule of thumb, you have to prove that the card that you're putting in is actually has those keywords and
right.
and the ability to let you do so. So Terraform will you'll either have to reveal it, which obviously the opponent knows, or it comes into play face up. I'm sure somebody in the comments will definitely comment on that.
Actually, you know what? Hold on one second. I forgot that I had the Hellboy rulebook in here. Maybe there's something on Terraform.
Maybe,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have it. Okay, here we go. Terraform. A keyword that some locations have. Terraform locations have the following payment power. Reveal this card. You may return a face down resource you control to its owner's hand. If you do, put this card face down in your resource row. Use this power only if this card is in your hand and only during your recruit step. So yeah, you do have to reveal
Yeah. So yeah, I feel shamed that I didn't know that
it.
one.
That's okay.
I
I mean, I didn't
much
know that for myself, so it's always good to have a. I think the Hellboy rulebook is like the most current in print rulebook that they made.
Okay. Yeah, like Game of Thrones, where the zealot is behind one of the characters and she's ringing the bell. She's like, shame.
That's
That's how
classic.
I feel right now.
It's okay. I
But
mean,
yeah,
hey, I just want to say, better that you know it now instead of like going to a tournament and not finding out what it did.
that's true. You just cheated into play, and they're like, Judge.
Yeah, Judge. Exactly.
So yeah, so Soul World is 2 cost location, Terraform. I call this the recursion package because a lot of decks like this, it requires multiple effects like this. But you activate, pay 4 endurance, which ouch, it hurts. But you get to return target character card from your KO pile to your hand, and there is absolutely no drawback, right, other than the 4 endurance. And if it's an Infinity Watch character, which it's never going to be, but let's just say it is, you get to gain 2 of that endurance, before the effect is said and done. So,
I mean, let's be realistic. I think the only good Infinity Watch character that I know of is the Moondragon from Herald of Galactus. I think it's a
I
4 drop.
really like Moondragon. I wanna work with that card one day. That's a good card, man.
That's the only good Infinity Watch card that comes off on the top of my head. But
Yeah,
here's another thing too to consider with using the Soul World. So in the Spider Style deck, you've talked about using Puppet Master, Cardiac, the 4 drop Spider-Man, the Exhauster stuff. And the way that I see it is, let's say you've exhausted all their stuff turn 2, turn 3, and turn 4, right? And
right.
they weren't able to touch you at all. Well, paying 4 endurance now doesn't sound like a bad idea, because if you're able to save, let's say, 5 or 10 endurance loss every turn from their characters attacking you, well, you've saved that much endurance that you can, pour into this location. If what I'm saying makes sense.
No, it does, and it's definitely why Soul World's actually in here, and especially as a 2 of instead of a 1 of.
Uh huh.
For that exact reason, you're saving yourself a lot of endurance loss during your time doing this.
Right.
Our next card in that recursion package is 2 copies of Slaughter Swamp. I love Slaughter Swamp. I think Slaughter Swamp's really underrated. You can activate, discard a card, return target character card from your KO pile to your hand. Whenever you recruit a Secret Society character with a cost of 3 or greater, you get to ready Slaughter Swamp. The last of the recursion package is obviously Avalon Space Station. If you discard a Brotherhood character, you get to return 2 characters from the graveyard to your hand instead. One of the reasons why it's split up like that, 3, 2, and 2, is to prevent yourself from having 2 copies of Avalon Space Station when you need to activate 2 recursion effects in one turn, and kind of help to ensure that you're doing, 1 recursion effect, another recursion effect, and then Soul World if you have it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Actually, this is actually going to be it for our locations. It's just 4 Empire State Universities and then the recursion package of 3 Avalon Space Stations, 2 Soul Worlds, and 2 Slaughter Swamps. There's really not much going on here, but you're going to understand why we need the recursion package here when we go over the plot twist. But that's it for the locations. Okay, so moving on to our plot twists. We have 4 copies of just a 1 threshold plot twist, right? 1 cost plot twist. And that's Bad Press. Bad Press is so good. It is so good in this deck. It is insane.
It's really good with that 2-drop Black Cat Master Thief, too.
It is. And there's actually decks. I think there's a deck called, the deck is actually called Just One.
Okay.
And it utilizes these type of effects that make like locations and plot twists cost 1 more to play. But that's the effect of Bad Press. So it's a 1 cost Marvel Web of Spider-Man plot twist. It's ongoing. Locations cost your opponent 1 more to flip. Plot twist costs your opponent 1 more to play. This is huge because I want to ask you a question, man.
Okay.
I want you to imagine a world like you're familiar with Enemy of My Enemy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And you're familiar with Mobilize, obviously, right? And most of our readers or most of our listeners should be familiar with this as well. What if Enemy of My Enemy costs 4 and then just initially costed 4? I don't think that it would really see hardly any play. Maybe it's a 2 of at the most in any deck.
Or now with this out, your Pathetic Attempts cost 5, and your on your Omnipotence cost 6. What?
Yeah, right. Mobilize, Enemy of My Enemy, all these cards seem less good.
Or let's say this is a big, like, Bad Press is a big FU to like Gotham Knights, to Doctor Doom, because now your Mystic Paralysis costs 5.
Reign of Terror. You can't Reign of Terror until turn 5. What?
There you go. And then with the if you have the Black Cat out, that's add 2 more costs to that. Like, yeah, it's just crazy.
It's really, really good. Everything from like Brother Eye Satellite for checkmate builds, making it cost 3 instead of 2. Bad Press can really put a damper on so many decks. Especially, here's the crazy part, especially when you're odds. Mm-hmm. So when you're odds, you obviously resource first, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when you resource first and Bad Press gets flipped, the opponent can't search out on turn 3 their 3-drop for enemy. And sometimes I've had games where that actually won me the game. It put them behind so bad that they just couldn't do anything.
Well, here's the thing, too. Let's say, for an example, their opening hand is like, let's say, like, a 6-drop, a 7-drop, an 8-drop, and a 5-drop character, right? And they decide to mulligan that, and then they draw something like, a Mobilize, thinking, oh, I have a 2-drop, but I'm going to get my turn 3 character on turn 3. Well, now you play this, you totally can change their strategy on how they're going to play the game now.
Absolutely. Yep. So. Definitely. Yeah, Bad Press is so good. So it's a 4 of, and the fact that it costs 1, that's first priority. It's priority above Empire State University.
And I'm actually surprised that Bad Press is one of those cards that like is still relatively cheap. I think it's like a $3 or $4 card.
It is. It is super cheap. The non-foil is definitely way less expensive than the foil. I think the foil can, it's somewhere between 5 and 7 or 4 and 7, depending on who you get it from. And it comes from everybody has Bad Press in their collection. Mm-hmm. It's just so easy to obtain, right?
Right.
Moving on to our 2-cost plot twist, we have 4 copies of Indebted, and this is another, like Aunt May, this is another kind of glue of the deck. This really helps you not have to run Mobilize or Enemy of My Enemy and change things up in the deck. Mm-hmm. To play Indebted, you need to discard a card. So if you discarded a card named Spider-Man, you search your deck for a Spider-Friends character card. Otherwise, you can discard a card, any card. So if the otherwise is like a plot twist or something like that, search your deck for a card named Spider-Man, reveal that card, and put it into your hand.
Right, and it could be any card. It could be like a useless plot twist, maybe a duplicate of a location you have to get your Spider-Man. But discarding a Spider-Friends, or I'm sorry, it's you discard Spider-Man to get a Spider-Friends, and then you can discard any card to get Spider-Man.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so yeah, sorry, I almost got that backwards.
No,
So
yeah, it's a tongue twister for sure.
So I played this many times in my Spider Friends or my Spider Stall deck, and 9 times out of 10, the Spider Friends character I get with Indebted is definitely the Scarlet Spider Ben Riley, because
Yeah.
if you don't have him in your hand, that's a really good target to get for with this card.
Yeah, no, Indebted is great. It's definitely for stuff like that and situations like that. I want to say that my top choices for Indebted, Scarlet Spider, because he's only 2 of, so you got to go grab him. Almost always, you got to go grab him. And then the 4-drop Spider-Man comes in next. That's one of the ones that I fetch out a lot. And then the 5-drop Spider-Man. And by the time all that's said and done, Empire State University, once we get to turn 6, I've usually drawn the Outlaw, both 7 drops, Sentry and Galactus. It's usually not a problem.
And the other thing I want to mention with Indebted too is, okay, so you can discard, let's say in your hand, you can discard the 4-drop Spider-Man to get, for an example, like the 5-drop Spider-Man, because he does have the printed Spider Friends team affiliation on him. So
Yeah.
that's also, but obviously you could not discard the 4-drop Spider-Man and get the 6-drop Spider-Man in your deck because it's a Marvel Knights and not a Spider Friends, obviously.
Right, which is important that we consider this when we use Aunt May, because Aunt May can fetch for any Spider-Man without it being a Spider Friends affiliation.
Right.
So it's important that if we know we have Indebted and we know we have Aunt May, we don't screw ourselves up by doing it in reverse, and now we're forced to play Scarlet Spider as our 6-drop, and we may even lose because of it.
Right, exactly.
Our next copy of the plot twist for 2 costs is Straight to the Grave, and this is the reason why we have to run the recursion package, is because Straight to the Grave combined with mulligan conditionings really help us with Puppet Master, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a 2-cost plot twist. You can search deck for a character card and just put it into your KO pile, right? And if you control Secret Society character, which isn't relevant here, you can search your deck for a non-character card as well as a normal card, right? And put it into the graveyard. Straight to the Grave, with our mulligan condition, we can make sure that we get Puppet Master, but Straight to the Grave should really be reserved for 6-drop Spider-Man at the lowest, right? Because Aunt May can fetch for him. Our 8-drop Sentry, our 9-drop Galactus, because those aren't dependent. Like, we can't fetch them any other way except for Empire State University. So make sure you save those straight to the graves for those situations that you can't get with Indebted or anything like that.
Yeah, and the only thing that you covered everything Straight to the Grave. The only thing I want to mention to the viewers is that there's some people out there that how this is like the old border, and then the DC Legends, they have like a new border and everything, and people tend to buy the newer border things more than the older border.
Oh yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I want to mention with Straight to the Grave, the DCL, they actually chopped off Superman's head in the picture. So I just wanted
okay.
I'm not sure if you ever noticed that, but it's the border kind of cuts off his head. So if you want the full appreciation of the artwork, get a copy of the Justice League Straight to the Graves. So I'll put a picture on the YouTube video so people can compare it. But that's always been my thing.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that. Shame, right? There's the shame bell again.
I know. Maybe it's symbolic for something. I don't know.
Maybe who knows?
Maybe because it's it was the end of the card game, since that was the last set. What?
Oh snap!
Well, actually, I think Marvel Evolution was technically the last set, but that was the last DC set.
They knew when they printed it. Exactly. It was symbolic in the fact that Upper Deck.
Subliminal.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for our 2-cost plot twist, and we'll go ahead and move on to our 3 costs. And that's 4 copies of Gift Wrap, and Gift Wrap is our panic button. I've seen so many players, and I'll tell you what it is here in a minute. I've seen so many players use Gift Wrap when they just didn't need to, and then they had a hard time in the late stages of the game, right?
So they've used it early on when you have to save it for the later game.
Yeah, because it's like, why? Like, why'd you do that when you could have just exhausted with everybody in the right timing and stuff like that?
Right.
So gift wrap. So to play it, you have to exhaust a character named Spider-Man,
Hmm.
which is another reason why the 5-drop Spider-Man exists, right?
Right.
The 5-drop Spider-Man is so good because he doesn't have to exhaust for his ability, and he's fuel for gift wrap so that you can exhaust all of the other stuff, right?
Right.
So you have to exhaust a character named Spider-Man. You can exhaust any number of target characters if their combined cost is less than or equal to that Spider-Man's cost.
Hmm.
Your main targets that you're going to use with this is your 4-drop Spider-Man because he doesn't exhaust. Your 5-drop Spider-Man, he doesn't exhaust. Your 7-drop Spider-Man, or your Spider-Man Starks Protege, right?
Oh, I love using gift wrap with Spider-Man Stark Protege because you pay the attack and then you get to exhaust them to exhaust something else.
Definitely, so good.
Or or like a 4 and a 3 drop or a 5 and a 2 or whatever combination you want. So
And remember also, you don't have to be on your opponent's turn to use gift wrap. So
right.
if for some weird reason, like you have to go on the offensive, or you have, a 7-drop Spider-Man, a 7-drop Spider-Man Starks Protege, and a Sentry or something like that, you can actually use gift wrap on a 6 or a 5-drop Spider-Man and
Mm-hmm.
exhaust their entire back row so that your main guys can beat in without your opponent being able to reinforce. And I've actually won some games like that.
Oh yeah, because if they have like for an example, like they have their turn 1 Aunt May still on turn 6 or 7, you
Uh-huh.
exhaust all the cards that are around her and then you just smack into her.
Definitely,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. But please just use this for a panic button. Don't just go don't just go sling
Don't throw it away
wraps.
like a piece of candy.
Yeah.
Like don't unwrap the candy and throw it
Right.
away.
Yeah. It's, you got to treat it like a butterscotch. Like you don't
Yeah.
want it. It's just there in case you need to give it to somebody. Our next plot twist in line is going to be 3 copies of Have a Blast. Have a Blast is a 3-cost plot twist. You can discard a card with Have a Blast, and then you can replace a location or ongoing plot twist, and then your opponent replaces that by putting the top card of their deck in its place.
Okay, so let me ask you, what is the number 1 card that you would want to replace with Have a Blast?
Omnipotence, because typically what people do is they'll Omnipotence and call Pathetic Attempt,
Right. Okay.
or they'll Omnipotence and call our Spider-Man Secret Avenger,
Okay.
or maybe even Sentry. They'll Omnipotence and call the Sentry. Now we can't remove their 8-drop, and that might put a kink into the plans. There's definitely a lot that we can call with Have a Blast, and team ups are really good too. Make it even harder for your opponent while you're stalling them out. I can't say for certain Omnipotence is your only option,
Mm-hmm.
but it basically whatever option is preventing you from doing your game plan. And if there's nothing available, then your next option needs to be whatever assists you in disrupting the game.
Right.
So usually that'll be a team up or something like that. There's only 3 copies of that, and then we move on to our later plot twist, right? Which we're gonna have 2 pathetic attempts and 2 omnipotence. And I know
Okay.
that we've talked about omnipotence and pathetic attempt like a lot. If you don't know what these do and you play Golden Age, like not you, but like our viewers,
Yeah.
it you know,
If I
and,
didn't know what they did, I'd be in trouble.
right. So if our viewers or readers don't know what it does, you deserve the shame bell as you leave your house. But
Yes.
Omnipotence is a 5-cost plot twist. You can only play it during the build phase. You can choose a card name. It does not have to be a plot twist. Any card. And its ongoing effect is plot twists with the chosen name can't be played, and the payment powers of cards with that name can't be used.
Keep in mind that omnipotence is also your cards in addition to their cards as well.
It is. It
So,
is.
like, if
Yeah.
you name Puppet Master when you're playing the Mirror Match, well, you can't use your Puppet Master now. So, you got to think twice before what you decide to choose.
Oh, right. Right. That's correct. And Pathetic Attempt essentially says that if a card targets a card, and then what's important is it's not just a card that you or a card you own, it's cards with the parentheses with the S next to card.
Mm-hmm.
Reign of Terror, things that target multiple cards in play, or even gift wrapped that targets multiple cards in play. Pathetic Attempt will actually negate that effect, like that text box.
Mm-hmm.
now is treated as if it is a blank text box,
Right.
which is, obviously super important. Golden Age seems to be all about disruption and evasion techniques of like just kind of sneaking through or cheating through certain mechanics. Pathetic Attempt is almost a must if you want to take Golden Age seriously.
Right. Makes
Uh,
sense. Like that,
so
I
there's
have nothing else to add about Omnipotence or Pathetic Attempt. I mean, they're just pretty straightforward.
They are,
uh,
yeah, they are pretty straightforward. Yeah, so Omnipotence, 2 copies of Omnipotence, 2 copies of Pathetic Attempt. So this is the list in a nutshell. This is the list that I've done, and I really enjoy it. And it really denies your opponent from doing almost everything, just in a basic matchup where your opponent's not doing anything techie, or anti what you're doing. Just a basic me versus you matchup. You got a basic deck. I have this. This will almost always win every time. It's pretty cool.
oh, okay. Right. Okay. So, yeah, that's pretty much Jacob's take on the Spider Stall deck.
And I
And
believe don't you have a list? You had a list that you had built, didn't you?
yeah, so I have a list that it uses a lot of the same cards that are used in this deck, but there is definitely some differences for the deck. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of go over my deck list, but how I'm going to do it is I'm going to go over all the cards that are the same in your build, and then I'm going to talk about the cards that are different in my build. I don't know, is there anything else that you want to add to your Spider Stall deck before we jump into mine?
No, man. I'm anxious to hear what you got.
Okay, so let's get started with my deck profile now. Okay, well, Jacob, thank you for sharing your Spider Stall deck with us. So now I'm going to share my version of the Spider Stall deck, and I will say that this is a version that it was posted on the Versus System Collective Facebook group. I'm sorry to say this, but I am a dirty net decker. So I actually copied this list from, I think it was Aaron Mead who came up with the list, and I'll put the link on the YouTube channel for people that want to check it out. But essentially, this deck is what's known as the No More Mr. Nice Guy build. No More Mr. Nice Guy is one of the plot twists that we use in the deck, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. But there are definitely some similarities to Jacob's deck, and then there's a lot of things that are different as well. So right now, I'm going to just kind of go over the cards really quick that are the same, and then I'm going to go into detail about some of the cards that are the different cards and what they do. So I am going to start by going with the characters, locations, and plot twists, just kind of like the same formula. So my deck runs the 4 copies of Aunt May, just like Jacob's deck does. It also runs the 2-drop Black Cat, but in my deck, I run 4 copies of that, and I'll get into a little bit more detail why that is later. We run the 1 copy of the 5-drop Spider-Man. We run 4, now in my version of the deck, we actually run 4 copies of the Scarlet Spider, the 6-drop. We run the 1 copy of the 7-drop Stark's Protege Spider-Man. And then we do run the recursion package of Avalon Space Station, Slaughter Swap, and Soul World, but in my version, we only want to run 1 copy of each, and there's a particular reason for that, which I will mention later. I run 3 copies of Empire State University as opposed to Jacob's 4 copies. I also run the Bad Press package. I run 4, just like Jake's deck. 4 copies of Indebted, 4 copies of Straight to the Grave. All those are the same. And I run 2 copies of Omnipotence as well. So those are the cards that I run about the same. So now I'm going to talk about some of the different cards in the deck. This is a deck that obviously changes can be made. It's, everybody can just interpret whatever they want, but this is the build that my build I'm just going to go over. And I've actually made this deck a couple days ago. It is February 12th now, and I actually made the deck on February 7th. So I just kind of tested it, and there's some things that I like about the deck, and there's some things that I can see changing about that. But anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about the different cards. The different cards that I run in this deck is I run 4 copies of our 1-cost character our other 1-cost character besides Aunt May is Spider-Man the Spider Earth 15. He has an ability called Shift, which is you can pay a resource point and shift him out of the game. And then you can put him into play equal to the number of shift counters that he has on him. And what his effect is you remove a shift counter from Spider-Man, negate target effect targeting a Weapon X or a Spider-Friend's character you control. Essentially, he's like a pathetic attempt, but on a character and only for our Spider-Friend's characters. He is kind of like, just helps us protect our Spider-Friend characters from certain effects that target them, and just kind of, that's kind of what he does. Now, there's another card that we use in combination with him, but we'll talk about that when we get into the plot twist. The next new card, I should say, that we run for him is probably one of the most well-known Spider-Man cards of all time, and probably the most expensive at $150 each. And
so expensive.
Oh yeah, and it's like, and this is the Spider-Man Ultimates. Now, what he does, his ability is characters named Spider-Man you control enter the play with 2 web counters on them. Remove X web counters from characters named Spider-Man you control. Exhaust any number of target characters with combined cost X or less. Use only once per turn. Now, the reason why he is so expensive, because he was a promotional card that was only given out to, I forgot, I don't know if you remember, Jacob, like, was it just like a hobby league kind of a card, or was he just an exclusive for tournaments? I don't remember.
I actually don't remember. I really don't.
I don't either.
Another shame moment for me, but I really don't remember.
So if anybody wants to leave in the comments of the YouTube channel, please let us know. I know it was something like that. He's essentially one of the key cards of the deck, and there's a reason why he's so expensive, because just the ability to exhaust, when he comes out, he can exhaust a 2-drop in theory, but that's only once per turn, so you can only activate his ability once per turn. But if you definitely wanted to not pay the $150 for this card, definitely your Cardiac, which is like a 35-cent common or uncommon, is like definitely a good choice. So if people want to swap that swap out get a Cardiac instead of the Ultimate Spider-Man, that is perfectly legitimate. So but yeah, that's Spider-Man Ultimates, and he's the 3 costs. So the next character that we have on our list is also another popular, and I think he's going for about $50 or $60 each for him, and that's the Spider-Man Zombie. And he has an ability, KO Spider-Man, which is himself. Target player exhausts a ready character he controls at the start of the recovery phase this turn. Return Spider-Man from his owner's KO pile to play under your control. Use only during the combat phase. So he's essentially a puppet master, right? Except he goes to the graveyard and he keeps coming back. But the nice combo with him is that since we do run the Scarlet Spider in the deck, and let's say we reveal it, so he's not unique for the turn, so we have the 3-drop and this 4-drop Spider-Man out. Well, every time we KO him to make them exhaust, he will come back into play with 2 web counters. So you can remove the 2 web counters from him, for an example, to exhaust a 2-drop. Plus, you get to KO him and make them exhaust another character. And then at the start of the recovery phase, when he comes back in, he'll actually come back into play with 2 more web counters. So it's just that's a nice, recursion to keep getting web counters on him. And I actually kind of like that combo a lot, is because, you can just, it's another different way to stall, sort of to speak. So, but yeah, that's going to be the Spider-Man Zombie. Now, moving on to our 5-drop characters, we have the card that we play that's different is, I think Jake plays the Firestar in his deck. Yeah. And in our deck, we play actually Lex Luthor Metropolis Mongol. And what he does is his card text is, your opponents cannot use payment powers or characters or equipments. So, for an example, they can't use the payment powers of, let's say, the 5-drop Spider-Man Secret Avenger, right? Or can't use any activated powers, essentially. So he's always been such a big threat in the game. Just not being able to use any activated or payment effects is just, could be just detrimental to some decks.
He's really good. I really like him. He's definitely a staple.
And actually, is Scarlet Spider considered a payment effect when you reveal?
The reveal, yeah.
So now there you go. That's another thing, is they can't reveal their Spider Friends characters, so can't make them not unique anymore. So yeah, that's going to be the Lex Luthor. And then moving on to the 6-cost characters, card that we play differently than Jake. Instead of playing the 6-drop Marvel Knights Spider-Man in Jake's deck, we play one copy of Human Torch Herald. And what his ability is you and characters you control cannot be the target of opposing effects. Now, he is a unaffiliated character that I just wanted to throw that out really quick. So the only way we can really search for him is like with the Straight to the Grave combo, with the recursion package. So that's the only way we could really get him into our hand. But I don't know. This is definitely, I'm not really sold on this card 100%. I would definitely take it out for that 6-drop Spider-Man, only because, having another search for Aunt May or another search with Indebted could be really good. So I really liked your strategy on that, Jacob, with the 6-drop Spider-Man. So that's definitely something I am considering.
Yeah, Human Torch is really good. I like Human Torch. I think that his effect can really help against some of the deck's worst matchups.
Okay.
Because allowing yourself to have like that ability to not be targeted can really come clutch. I really do believe that it's great, and it's great in the mirror matchup too, because you can't be targeted by like things like Puppet Master or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's true. Now your 7 drops were the Stark's Protege, and who was the other one again?
It was the Amazing Spider-Man.
That's right. That's right.
The Spider-Man one.
So instead of the Amazing Spider-Man, we play the 7-drop. The 7-drop Starfire. I think her name's pronounced Coriander. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that right.
No, that's right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Coriander Starfire, Zal's Fury. And what she does is, at the start of the recovery phase, stun all opposing characters. So she is essentially a better version of the 9-drop Onslaught. And
she is so good. She is one of the best 7-drops, I think, in Golden Age.
And, I mean, the only downside is she's a 15 attack, but, I mean... it's small price to pay, right?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, who cares, right?
She's essentially a better version of the 9-drop Onslaught. I don't have anything else to say. She's just awesome. Definitely one of the better 7-drops in the game, like you said.
If you've ever been on the receiving end of a Starfire and you just like watch it happen, like you can't really do much about it, it's not very fun. I mean, this card alone can seal the deal in a lot of matchups.
Yeah. Okay. So then the last of the characters that we're going to talk about that we play differently is, now I don't know if I guess we could say instead of playing Galactus we play this card, but this is a character card that we don't necessarily play, but we use it more for its effect, and that is the Beyonder Inhuman. And his ability is remove the Beyonder and another card in your hand from the game. Recover target stunned character if there are no other cards named the Beyonder removed from the game. Use only if the Beyonder is in your hand. So his effect, in my play testing, the only time that I really find him useful is, well, there's 2 times I find him useful. Number 1, if they stunned our Human Torch and we need to recover him so we can't be the target of effects. Right. Or more importantly, if somehow our opponent has stunned the Coriander Starfire, and we actually have a window before the recovery phase where we can activate his effect to recover her. Then when we get to the recovery phase, we can stun all the opposing characters.
Yeah, so he's a must, I think, if you're running Starfire.
Yeah, so that's the only time. That's like what I would save him for. That would be it. But I could definitely see maybe taking him out for Galactus, because the Galactus is just... I mean, if you're on the even initiative on turn 9 and they drain you, and then you play your own Galactus and you just drain him back, then it's just like, oh, well, now I just won the game,
That's true. That's true.
But, so yeah, okay, so that's it for the different characters that we have. And going to the locations, we run the exact same locations as Jacob does, except we run 3 copies of Empire State University, and we run 1 copy of Soul World, 1 copy of Slaughter Swamp, and 1 copy of Avalon Space Station. Now, the reason why we run 1 copies of the Recursion package is because we play a plot twist that has a similar effect to them, and that plot twist is the 3-cost Messiah Complex. And what Messiah Complex does is you return a character card from your KO pile to your hand, and it has a boost effect. And what boost is, it's like an additional cost you can pay for playing this card. And the boost effect is exhaust 2 characters you control, gain endurance equal to the cost of the character you return. So, for an example, let's say we play Straight to the Grave to bury something. So let's say the Beyonder, right? And
Mhm.
because maybe our Starfire is stunned and we need to recover, we could play Straight to the Grave and bury the Beyonder. Then what we could do is we could play Messiah Complex, exhaust 2 characters, and gain 10 endurance.
Yeah.
But the only problem with the boost, like there's a lot of cards that have like boost and exhausting characters. Now, the only problem I will say with this is since we play Empire State University, it does become kind of awkward that we're exhausting characters for Empire State University and Messiah Complex. So it could be kind of hard to keep, like if we exhaust Aunt May for Empire and then we have a 3 and a 4 drop out on the field, to exhaust our 3 and 4 drop just to gain 10 endurance seems kind of weird because we would rather be attacking or activating effects or something like that. So it does come a little awkward, but for the most part, it's just a good way to get a card back from the graveyard to our hand. So yeah, that's 4 copies of Messiah Complex. Okay, so now we come to another 3-cost plot twist, an ongoing plot twist that makes the deck kind of unique from Jacob's deck, and that is 4 copies of No More Mr. Nice Guy. And what that card does, it is, like I said, it's an ongoing plot twist. Non-army characters you control that share 1 or more names with a shifted card you own get +2 attack and +2 defense. So, what's the only shift card that's relevant with this? Well, we just talked about the 1-drop Spider-Man, the Spider. So, here's another fun thing. So, even if he shifted out, let's say we remove the shift counter to negate some kind of effect that's targeting one of us. Well, even though he doesn't have the shift counter, he's still shifted out. So having No More Mr. Nice Guy gives us +2/+2 to our Spider-Man Ultimates, Spider-Man Ultimates, the Spider-Man Zombie. But most importantly, and now makes our turn 5 Spider-Man an 11/12, which is huge for a 5-drop in my opinion.
Yeah.
It can almost take out 6 drops and not quite there. But if we have like 2 copies of No More Mr. Nice Guy, then then he gets +4/+4 and he becomes really powerful. Now he can take out 6 drops.
We can also give the Stark's protege some additional attack to pay for the variance cost, right? So
Yeah.
You can pay 18 now, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
60.
That is true. So that's kind of so that's No More Mr. Nice Guy. Now, Jacob, in your build, you played 3 copies of Have a Blast, which is obviously discard a card and replace a location or plot twist.
Yeah.
So in our deck, what's different is we play 3 copies of Death of the Dream, and what this card does, it is a 3-cost plot twist. To play, exhaust the character you control, replace target face-up resource, and it also has a boost effect. Exhaust an additional character you control, replace an additional face-up resource. So by exhausting 1 character, we replace a resource, and by exhausting 2 characters, we can replace 2 resources. Now, I also want to mention in this card that it doesn't have to be your opponent's resource. It can be your own resource. Personally, I don't find a reason to replace our resources in any way. But maybe there's a situation where that might be relevant, that you might want to replace like a face-up plot twist you played or something like that. But for the most part, I just use it on my opponent's cards.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so now, instead of your 2 copies of Pathetic Attempts, in my build, we play 2 copies of Enemy of My Enemy. And I know we've gone over this card many times before, but I'm just going to go over it really quick. As an additional cost to play Enemy of My Enemy, discard a character card. Search your deck for an affiliated character card that does not share a printed affiliation with the card you discarded. Reveal the card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. In Jacob's deck, he has a lot, with the exception of the 6-drop Spider-Man Marvel Knights, most of your characters are Spider Friends. I mean, obviously Galactus isn't also, and then the Sentry, and maybe a couple of other cards.
There's not much fuel. There's not much fuel that I have to justify running it in my build.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. I was about to say, there's no point for you running Enemy of My Enemy. But in my deck, I have the 5-drop Lex Luthor. I have the 7-drop Starfire. I think those are the only targets. Yeah, because I can't get Human Torch with it because he has no printed, and same with Beyonder. But that's the only reason why I play it. But I can easily take out the Lex Luthor and the Starfire and then take out Enemy of My Enemies for Pathetic Attempts if I was playing more Spider Friends. But
right.
but yeah, that's my version of the deck in a nutshell. I know I went kind of fast, but we already went over some of the cards from Jacob's deck, and I don't know, Jacob, is there anything that you wanted to add to this?
No, not really. I mean, I really like Messiah Complex, and we'll talk about and it's both of us, some of our bad matchups. Messiah Complex kind of helps bridge that gap a little bit. Human Torch does too. Really love what you did with the Human Torch in there. It's pretty good. No More Mr. Nice Guy is, a lot of people think of No More Mr. Nice Guy as like an additional like attack, but the reality is that, especially in a deck that's just kind of stalling ish to try and get to 7 so that Coriander can really pop off and win you the game. No More Mr. Nice Guy, especially in multiple copies, acts as a wall for our defense. So like Spider-Man, our 3-drop Spider-Man now becomes a 7 defense with No More Mr. Nice Guy. And if you have 2, it's a 9 defense. And sometimes those things can really add up and actually give our opponents some heavy issues.
Right. And okay, so if I was gonna make changes to this deck, I'm just gonna go over that really quickly. Changes that I could potentially make is I feel like more than one copy of Spider-Man Zombie needs to be in this deck somewhere. Because if you reveal let's say you don't happen to hit your 5-drop like the Lex Luthor or the Spider-Man Secret Avenger, you can then reveal Scarlet Spider, make them non-unique. Having 2 Spider Zombies on the field seems pretty good because you get to exhaust 2 of their characters a turn.
Yeah, and I mean with the ultimates, the web counters and stuff,
Yeah.
it would be a good idea.
So you can remove essentially 4 web counters from 2 from your Spider Zombie and 2 from your other Spider Zombie, exhaust their 4-drop, and then KO both of them to make them exhaust their other stuff, and then they come back into play with 4 web counters total. So 2 on each, obviously. But
yeah.
I think definitely putting more than one copy of the Spider-Man Zombie is good. Now, here's the little awkward part about the deck is that the Spider-Man, the Spider, you have to shift on either turn 1 or turn 2, I feel. And the reason why is because you don't want to shift them on turn 3 because that's when you're going to be playing Spider-Man Ultimates, or you don't want to shift them on turn 4 because that's when you'll play the Spider-Man Zombie. So I feel like it's like if you don't shift them by turn 1 or turn 2, you're not going to shift them until until turn 8, which at that point it's just too late for it at that point.
Yeah.
And now since you can't play, if you don't play them on turn 1 or turn 2, all of your No More Mr. Nice Guys are practically garbage. Like, they do nothing if you draw them late in the game. I mean, you can pitch them to, like, Indebted or other card effects, But I just feel like it's a really dead card in the late game. So if I was to make another change, I wouldn't mind taking out Spider-Man the Spider and No More Mr. Nice Guy for, like... I would replace the Spider-Man the Spider probably for that Puppet Master, because that Puppet Master is just so good in the deck.
Like, yeah, definitely. I tested this out a little bit, and I actually I want to hear you finish your thought. Okay. What were you about to say?
So what I would do is I thought about taking out, because in my play testing it's like, now I also thought about there's another combo you can do. Remember, Spider-Man the Spider is not Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man the Spider. So he gets over the uniqueness rule, which is kind of cool. But you can also, if you need to, if he's shifted out and you need to play him so he can get 2 web counters with the Ultimate Spider-Man so he can exhaust, more things and have more fuel, that is a potential play you could do. But I normally maybe have done that like once or twice in my play testing. But that is definitely an avenue you could do. And if I was to get rid of the No More Mr. Nice Guys, I would definitely maybe replace it with like either your gift wrapped or more pathetic attempts or something like that. And then I would maybe cut the Black Cat Master Thief, like maybe run 2 at most, because again, she's another character that's like just really does nothing in the late game, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could ditch her for like card effects, yeah, that's fine. But I could see definitely taking some of her out too. So
I've play tested not this exact build, but I've play tested builds like it. And when I did. And this isn't to say that the deck isn't good. I think the deck is fine. There's honestly just the concept of, I mean, sometimes you can just play on curve and the game doesn't end on turn 7. So
Right.
sometimes you can just play this stuff and not do anything at all, not stall, not do anything at all, and
Right.
still drop Coriander with Beyonder support and win the game.
Right.
And just those two cards alone makes this deck really bonkers, really good.
And if
And I think for
and if I remember, the Coriander, her effect happens at the start of the recovery phase. So they
mhm.
stun all their guys, then they go to recovery and they recover whatever character they want to keep.
Yeah, and now
Right.
and now you get to to go in. I mean, it's so
Right.
good. But I tried the No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it was so dependent on getting multiple copies, and like you said, it was so dependent on shifting out Spider-Man early
Yeah.
that it just to my play style and all the testing, I just really got turned off to it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Exactly. And the other thing too is, I believe the Spider-Man the Spider is quite expensive. I think
he is actually, yeah.
he's like a I want to say he's like a 35 or $40 card for each of them.
Mhm.
So if it's like if you wanted like a budget option, you could definitely cut him out as well.
Definitely. And I've seen some Spider Saw lists that run one of him, like four Aunt Mays and one Spider Man the Spider, just on the off chance that you get him just because they had like an extra slot or something.
Okay.
But yeah, no, this is a fine list, and nowhere Mr. Nice Guy. There's going to be a lot of situations where your opponent gets really frustrated. I would agree with you with the second Spider Man zombie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, two Spider Man zombies for this rotation that you're attempting to do seems pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for our deck profiles. I guess also if people want to leave comments on the YouTube channel to see like what deck they like the best, or maybe like cards that they would put in their own version of a Spider Cell deck, maybe they can add that later. But yeah, I think I'm pretty much done. And if you're done, you want to move on to the rotation curve section.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started with that.
Okay, so the rotation, we've talked so much about all of these cards. I feel like the rotation at this point is almost self-explanatory, but I will go over like a couple of strategies and tactics that we're going to attempt to do during the rotation. One of them is obviously don't discard to Aunt May. Like turn one, you're playing the Aunt May. Don't discard to her like to go fetch for a Spider-Man. That doesn't even make sense. Just play your normal on turn one or whatever. You want to set up straight to the grave with your recursion effects, which are two cost locations. So your mulligan conditionings is honestly like Puppet Master in your opening hand, or some combination of straight to the grave, Soul World, Avalon Space Station, or Slaughter Swamp, so that you can actually get Puppet Master. If you don't get Puppet Master, that's what the gift wraps are for. So don't freak out if Puppet Master isn't in your opening hand. It's not like some mutant mental variant where you have to have this 2-drop stage to draw two cards every turn or you lose. It's not like that. So just try your best to make sure that you have Puppet Master. Black Cat is mainly going to be in there for you to indebted when you don't have a 2-drop at all. That's why we're running just one Black Cat, and then her effect is going to be, a plus to that. So if you don't have Puppet Master, don't fret because Black Cat's ability is pretty good, and we have gift wrapped between Empire State University with Aunt May on turn two, Mulligan Conditionings, Straight to the Grave Soul World, and Indebted. There is no reason to not have a 2-drop. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, moving on, our 3-drop is Cardiac. We're going to tap Cardiac. We're going to stun the opposing character, and then Puppet Master is going to exhaust on curve. So, you know, just make sure as you're going through this, because we talked about the curve a lot when we were doing the deck tech. Just make sure that you're utilizing Empire State University every turn for Aunt May, and the curve that we talked about for Puppet Master exhausting on the turn is so important to follow. If you don't follow this and you activate Puppet Master first, you will likely have to use your gift wrap that turn because you made a mistake. And then, if you repeat these mistakes when we get to turn 8, they're going to break through your defenses and they're going to kill you. So you have to rotate perfectly with this deck. So Empire State University with Aunt May, and just remember, there's going to be moments where they still get through sometimes because of combat tricks. So if you're on odds, take Aunt May and ram it into another character during the combat step. What this will do is this will flip Aunt May, and it'll lessen her as a target so that you don't take as much breakthrough damage. And the same with Puppet Master. If you finding yourself turn 6 or 7, Puppet Master is useless. They have too many characters on the board, and Puppet Master just isn't exhausting on curve. On your combat, run Puppet Master into the opponent's character, take the 2 damage, and just don't choose not to recover any of your characters. And Puppet Master will just go to the graveyard.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, beyond that, the curve is exactly the same. Use your gift wrap sparingly. Use your omnipotence only for making sure that the opponent can't disrupt you. Save your pathetic attempts for the Galactus battle. And honestly, that's the basic rotation. That's probably about all that there really is needs to be said, because it's not like Mega City where you have all these different options. If the opponent does this, do that, right?
Right.
The only option we really have is if they're playing a rush deck with a ton of 1 and 2 drops, drop Firestar instead of Secret Avenger, and that's basically it.
Right. Okay, so just really quick with my curve of my version of the Spider Cell deck. So on turn 1, you either want to play Aunt May or Spider-Man the Spider, obviously. But if we don't shift out Spider-Man the Spider by turn 1 or turn 2, our No More Mr. Nice Guy plan is practically offline. So if we draw No More Mr. Nice Guy later in the game, we just have to pitch it to like Avalon Space Station, Slaughter Swamp, or any of our discard effects. It's blank in our hand if we don't shift out the Spider-Man the Spider by turn 1 or turn 2. Turn 2, ideally, we don't want to shift Spider-Man the Spider. We want to play the Black Cat, Master Thief on turn 2, and we want to hopefully have 1 or 2 bad presses in our opening hand, just so like all their plot twists start costing more. So we go on that strategy if we have a combination of bad press and Black Cat, Master Thief. Turn 3, we want to play the Ultimate Spider-Man. That's about it. Turn 4, we want to play the Spider Zombie and start getting our engine of exhausting their 2-drop and maybe whatever character when we KO with Spider-Man Zombie. And when he comes back to play, we'll refuel the web counters on him. Turn 5, I rarely use the Lex Luthor, but I really use the 5-drop Spider-Man a lot just because when the Spider-Man comes to play, we get more web counters if we have Spider-Man Ultimates out, so we can start exhausting more of their characters. Turn 6, we want to play the Human Torch. We don't want to play Scarlet Spider on turn 6. The only time you should play Spider-Man Scarlet Spider on turn 6 is if it's your initiative and you plan on attacking them. Otherwise, try to get the Human Torch on turn 6. And then turn 7, we want to play the Coriander Starfire, but Spider-Man Stark's Protege, also a reasonable target. And obviously the Beyonder, we want to use his effect on mainly 2 characters. The Human Torch, Herald, and the Coriander Starfighter. Now, there's also argument to use the Beyonder's effect on the 3-drop Ultimate Spider-Man if they're going to play like a finishing move or something like that, because he is an important part in this build of the deck too. Because once we have the Ultimate Spider-Man and Spider Zombie combo online, we kind of want to keep it consistent like that. But besides that, that's pretty much the curve, and that'll be it for my deck. Jake, is there anything else you want to add?
No, man. I think we pretty much covered how both decks rotate and what you should be doing.
Okay, so now we come to our FAQ section of this episode. Okay, so on a scale from 1 to 10, how good would you rate the Spider Stall deck in general, no matter what build it is?
I would rate the deck to be, if we were to rank it from 1 to 10, I think specific builds would rank on that list just a scotch higher. In consistency and in how it deals with other Golden Age decks. But in general, I mean, when we're looking at, just a basic blanket version, I would probably say somewhere between 7 and 10 on a scale of 1 to 10
Okay.
Any Spider Stall deck. It's very good.
Okay, yeah, that sounds reasonable. Okay, so the next question on the list, what are the good matchups of the deck and what are the bad matchups?
Good matchups is any deck where you're playing just a single character.
Okay.
Like any deck where they're just curving out normal. It's a very good matchup for us just because of the exhaustion methods. Because they have to break through that exhaustion methods, break through those walls, and they have to take us from 50 endurance to 0. That's a lot to keep up with. Getting bad pressed, getting black catted, getting gift wrapped, depending on your build, getting exhausted. That's a lot to try and deal with and try and take us to 0 endurance. any deck that just has a single, the list is too much to name,
Right.
and I think that that's why it's one of the top decks in Golden Age. As far as the worst matchups, Convex is an awful matchup for us. I dare say we'll lose the Convex matchup. Convex is the Exiles Panopticron combo with
Oh.
Blackthorn and Checkmate.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
So Siren is going to be a 4-drop that burns us for 1 every time an activated ability is used.
Oh, okay, right.
So yeah, we'll just straight up like lose to that. Like, I mean, there's just not a whole lot that we can do. Terrible matchup for us. Other bad matchups is Shield Burn isn't very good for us. Any voltage variant where you can equip a flamethrower or an advanced hardware and abuse the burn mechanic is going to be like a serious uphill battle for us. To be honest, it's, and it's why I've chosen Firestar as an additional 5-drop, but it's so one-sided. Like these matchups, we're gonna lose more often than we're gonna win, and that's why I actually like your Human Torch Herald idea,
Oh, yeah.
because it makes us obviously invulnerable to those burn effects, but we will still lose to Convex. So this is why in this list I've chosen to really zone in on just exhausting the on curve characters and just eat the loss from some of the other matchups that are like shield burn and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, okay. So moving down the list here. So I've noticed one of the big significant difference between our builds is I run obviously the 3-drop Ultimate Spider-Man, but you decided to run the 3-drop Cardiac
Right.
in that slot instead. Is that like a personal choice, or what's the reason behind running that Cardiac?
So, yeah, that's an awesome question. It's probably a question that has made people's blood boil because when we think of like the best slot in this 3-drop, we think about Spider-Man Ultimates,
Right.
and I think that that's true if we're not using Puppet Master.
Okay.
If Puppet Master wasn't in the deck, I would be running the 3-drop Ultimate Spider-Man.
Okay.
I really would be. So it's not a cost thing. I actually own 4 Spider-Man Ultimates in my collection. I in my testing, I have found Cardiac, and I know this is going to make people upset, but I have found Cardiac to be better than Spider-Man Ultimates.
Okay.
In every way imaginable, but only when we're running Puppet Master. Without that factor, I think Spider-Man Ultimates becomes equal to, if not better than Cardiac, specifically because of his slots. Um, specifically because of specifically because of the stats on Spider-Man Ultimates having like higher stats. The Cardiac's big downfall is his garbage defense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just no booty there at all. I mean, it's so bad.
Well, a lot of 3-drops are like 4/5s or 5/5s and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
and
and that
yeah,
kind of
and
hurts that.
definitely it's 5. Usually, it's 5 or higher is like the golden standard. The
Mm-hmm.
best is usually like a 6/6 in the form of like Wolverine or something like that.
Or the
But
3-drop Juggernaut from Marvel Legends.
yeah, yeah. You just get no sauce out of
Yeah.
Cardiac in combat,
Right.
and that's why Puppet Master is so important. I think that, you know, I think that with Spider-Man Ultimates, I think that Omnipotence calling Spider-Man
Mm-hmm.
was my biggest like. It just hurt.
Mm-hmm.
When you flip Omnipotence, you call Spider-Man. The name is such a broad range
Right.
that I found that 3-drop Ultimates Spider-Man was not as good.
So let me ask you this: when you flip over Omnipotence and you name a card Spider-Man, does that hurt like the 3-drop Spider-Man, the 5-drop Spider-Man, or do they have to specifically say like Spider-Man Secret Avenger, Spider-Man Ultimates?
No, the card name is like because think about that. Scarlet Spider
Uh-huh.
says card's name Spider-Man,
Right.
right? And so with Scarlet Spider, you don't have to call Spider-Man the Sensational Spider-Man.
Okay.
You just say Spider-Man, and Omnipotence says choose a card name.
Okay. So that's
And
all of your
so
cards.
yeah, and that's another reason why Spider-Man Zombie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've experimented with all of these different builds, and I don't want to give my opponent an excuse to flip Omnipotence and name Spider-Man
Hmm.
and shut down my 4-drop Spider-Man, my 5-drop Spider-Man, my 6-drop Spider-Man, and my 7-drop Spider-Man,
Right.
which they will do, and that's why I need bad press to make
Hmm.
their Omnipotence cost 1 more, so I can flip Omnipotence and call Omnipotence.
Right. Okay.
You see what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out, they kill off the bad press, they kill off my Omnipotence, they flip their own and name Spider-Man, and my 3-drop is Spider-Man, and I'm running the Spider-Man zombie with the combo and everything.
Hmm.
Omnipotence can actually single-handedly make me lose the game.
Right.
And so having Cardiac and Puppet Master there offsets that risk. And, that's one of the reasons why I've chosen Cardiac over Spider-Man Ultimates. And that's honestly the only reason why I've done it.
What are some budget options for the deck? Obviously, a budget option is replace the Ultimate Spider-Man with Cardiac. Replace the Spider-Man, the Spider with maybe Puppet Master,
Mhm.
and replace Coriander Starfire with Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yep.
But is there anything else that any budget options that you would have for the deck?
Yeah, if you can't afford the Sentry, he's not crazy in price, but he is a scotch pricey.
Or maybe
You
if
could,
he's like scarce and you just can't get a hold of him.
yeah, absolutely. You can replace him with Cosmic Spider-Man.
Ooh.
And the reason why is because your 7-drop Spider-Man, you can actually discard Cosmic Spider-Man to the 7-drop Spider-Man and exhaust their 8-drop.
Oh,
And then
that's interesting.
you can recur your 8-drop and cast it or recruit it, and then you can look to attack their 7-drop with your 8-drop.
Okay.
So all's not lost if you don't have the Sentry. I think it's one of the better 8-drop options. Cosmic Spider-Man's definitely a good one. And I mean, even Ezekiel. We talked about Ezekiel drawing the cards.
Oh yeah.
Um, you can just forego getting bashed on turn 8. You'll probably be fine if you've exhausted everything else. And you can play Ezekiel for the additional card draw, and you'll draw into some additional gift wraps, and maybe even draw into the Galactus. Having a third 7-drop isn't going to make or break you or anything like that, especially if you've done everything up to this point. I don't think you can swap out Spider-Man 4-drop for anything cheaper. I think the
Right.
deck kind of falls apart if you don't have that 4-drop.
Right, and he's also a card that's not too terribly expensive. Also,
No, he's not too bad, I don't think.
unless you try to go for that impossible EA version, that
Yeah, that's
not the stacker, but the EA version.
yeah.
Um, if you really wanted to be baller, but okay. So one thing also that I've noticed between our two different decks is you run obviously 4 copies of Puppet Master and 1 copy of Black Cat, and I run 4 copies of Black Cat. But you and I also play 4 copies of Bad Press. So I guess this question is, why run 4 copies of Puppet Master and 1 copy of Black Cat when you play 4 Bad Press?
There's going to be some moments, especially if you know that Puppet Master isn't going to be the best in the matchup. Black Cat is a one of can be fetched out for Indebted.
Mm-hmm.
So if you tried to mulligan, you've done everything you can, you still can't get Puppet Master out there. You can Indebted for your 2-drop,
Okay.
and this is especially going to be good um, in, like, say you didn't draw Bad Press and your opponent is on odds. That means they're going to be able to mobilize or enemy of my enemy before you can play the Bad Press that you just drew on turn 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they get to go first. Or on turn 3, let's say that the only thing you can do is flip Bad Press, but it's after your opponent has 3 resources in, they
Right.
can respond. They can go ahead and have an enemy on board or use it before you have a chance to flip that Bad Press. But on turn 2, Black Cat will make the enemy of my enemy cost 2 more. And so sometimes Black Cat needs to be in there if you know that the turn 2 is a detrimental play for your opponent. If you can shut that down by forcing them to not be able to play enemy, sometimes you can come in clutch and win the game.
Okay. Yeah, then that makes a lot of sense. And our next question is, I noticed that another difference between our deck is you run 3 copies of Have a Blast, whereas my version of the deck runs 3 copies of Death of the Dream. So why do you run Have a Blast over Death of the Dream?
Well, Puppet Master is exhausting every turn. Cardiac's exhausting every turn. Spider-Man isn't exhausting every turn, but it's either going to be fueled to Empire State University or Aunt May.
Mm-hmm.
And so you usually, I've just never had the luxury, except for on turn 5, which I feel like is too late. And turn 5, I'm using combat to actually attack with Spider-Man into their 5-drop. I just can't exhaust anything to it. That's my main issue. If I could, I would totally run Death of the Dream over Have a Blast, but I just in testing could never make it work and exhaust my opponent's characters at the same time.
Okay, that makes sense because you're pretty much you don't run Death of the Dream because you have characters with activated abilities and they're going to be exhausted, and so
Right.
you don't have the opportunity to exhaust them for Death of the Dream because you're using them for other things.
Correct. Yep.
What are some of the individual cards that hurt the Spider Stall deck?
There isn't any real silver bullet answers that Spider Saul really just loses to, but Human Torch Herald is one of your biggest problems. So if you're not playing like an anti meta Spider-Man deck, which those do exist, where you're just there to beat Spider Stall and that's it. If you're just looking to run one card that's going to help you against, like if you're playing me, you're looking for just one card that's going to help you. Human Torch Herald is really good.
Mm-hmm.
If Human Torch Herald isn't nullified, we just lose.
And I took the liberty to write a list of potential other cards, and I just want to see if you agree or disagree with me.
Sure.
Real quick.
Sure.
Okay, what about Only Human?
Only Human's good. Yep. Only
Okay.
Human's fine.
Pathetic Attempt?
Pathetic Attempt is obviously pretty decent.
Spider-Man Secret Avenger?
Yep. In the mirror matchup, absolutely.
Okay,
yep.
now this one is probably one that doesn't see a lot of Golden Age play in my opinion, but the Batman Cape and Cowl, the 6-drop from World's Finest.
That's good as well. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And then the Mr. Sinister, obviously. I think it's the 3-drop, right?
Yeah. Mr. Sinister's good. Yep.
And then the last card, what about Total Anarchy? Is that a bad card for the deck?
Total Anarchy is bad if you can get through and fight me in combat.
Okay.
That's when
but if you're exhausting all the characters, then it's really irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, yeah, in a way, because what's going to happen is the character that you're trying to use to hit Puppet Master, I'm going to cardiac it off. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So you can get there if you're running Total Anarchy, Mikado Amasha, and you play a 1-drop that's like a decent stats, and then a 2-drop that's a decent stats.
Okay.
So now I go to play Aunt May, you flip Total Anarchy, you Mikado Amasha it off the board by discarding it,
Mm-hmm.
you hit me, and then we untap, ready everything, we draw, I play Puppet Master. I have one character on the board. You have a 1-drop, Total Anarchy up, and then you drop your 2-drop.
Yeah.
Well, now, if I exhaust Puppet Master, you exhaust your one dude, now you attack with your one left, and now Puppet Master's gone. I just lose.
And if they KO'd your Aunt May early too, it prevents you from using Empire State University on turn 2 as well.
It does, and that's rough. And another reason why Bad Press is decent, if you can go first and open out with Bad Press, that can help things just a little bit, so your Aunt May doesn't get KO'd, and it can help just a scotch.
Right.
But yeah, out of all of that you've mentioned, though, most of those things, and this is one of my gripes, and I'd love to talk about this more if we ever do like something on just Golden Age in general and just really chat about Golden Age. A lot of these things are just one use that can be responded with my own triggers. So if you turn around and you say, okay, I'm gonna Cape and Cowl your Cardiac, or I'm gonna Only Human your Spider-Man, I can just respond by using Spider-Man's ability.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those, when I say silver bullet answers, I mean when you drop it, I start sweating bullets. You know what I mean? And Total Anarchy is one of those.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it early enough with the right setup, but Human Torch Herald is one of the biggest problems, right? Because you can't be the target of opposing effects, and I think cards you own can't be the target. So I can't stall anything. You drop that, I'm done, man. Like, that's it. Good game. Like, good job. You won.
Well, and I will say that Total Anarchy for my version of the deck could be kind of bad because if it's the 3-drop Ultimate Spider-Man that gets KO'd, that's like the big piece in my deck. And if that gets KO'd, it's kind of hard to go back from that.
Definitely.
Try to catch up from there. But
right.
Okay, so moving down the list of questions. Is this list finalized? So I guess what that means is,
am I done?
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, is your list like the deck list that you've done? Is that like the final version, or can you obviously make more changes to it?
You can. It's dependent on your meta. It's dependent on what your play group is playing, and it's dependent on what you're expecting to run into at your tournament.
Mhm.
Which is why you need a sideboard. Got to have a sideboard, man.
Okay, now, so if we want to, I know that there's no sideboard in the Versus System TCG at all,
Right.
but let's just say maybe not necessarily make like a 15 card sideboard like other games or whatever, but what are some like option like cards that like hate cards that you can put in your deck in replace of like other things? Not that
Right.
you have to mention like, oh, I want to replace the Cardiac for like the 3-drop King Cobra. But let's say like there are cards that you could put in the deck that hate on the other decks. What would those be?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and that I kind of have a good time like trying to make our readers blood boil or our listeners blood boil a little bit because
Viewers, listeners, whatever, they're the same.
yeah, when you hear that sideboard, you're like, there's no sideboard in Versus, But hear me out for a second because I think that this is really important. Anytime you build a deck, right? Like,
Mhm.
let's say we build a deck. Every play group is different. Let's say you go to New York, right? And
Right.
shout out to the boys up in New York. But let's say you go up there, their decks are going to be totally different in their play group than if we go to say, Idaho or something like that or California.
Right.
Everything's going to be a little bit different. So what do? Do you run back to your collection and sift through all of these cards and spend another 3 hours, or do you have roughly 15 cards that you don't bring to the play group? Like you're not bringing this and swapping them out. You're a complete jerk.
Maybe they're just cards that you keep in your trade binder, or
Right,
whatever.
yeah, or whatever, or even even the deck box, but you never pull it out. You never swap the cards in and out depending on who you're playing. That's just mean to do. But 15 cards of a list of what you could, like you said, swap in and out. And I would say that my 15, like if I were to make a 15 card sideboard, knowing that I can't swap in between play testing sessions, or whatever, my 15 card sideboard list would be this. It would be 3 Black Cats, right? Master Thieves. It would be Caliban. We talked about that in the Mega City podcast.
Right.
That's the one that will shut down the card draw engines from the combo decks, right?
Right.
1 copy of Kang Cobra.
Okay.
So in case that everyone's playing Mega City, you're gonna want 1 Kang Cobra in there, or everyone plays Good Guys, right? Something like that. You want 2 extra Omnipotence, 2 extra Pathetic Attempts. That way you can swap. If no one in the group plays Omnipotence or Omnipotence is banned in that play group, but you can play Pathetic Attempts, then you would swap out your 2 Omnipotence for 2 more Pathetic Attempts, right?
Right.
The 7-drop from your deck, the Coriander.
Mm-hmm.
I think that definitely deserves a slot in the sideboard list. Human Torch, the Herald, the 6-drop, definitely. If everyone's running Spider Stall, then you're gonna want 1 copy in your deck so that you can deal with that pretty well. Spider Girl, I think it's from MEV, Marvel Evolutions. You know what I'm talking about? The 3-drop evasion.
Is that the one that when it gets stunned, you get to negate their effects or something?
Yes.
I think,
yes. Basically, yeah.
I think that's from Universe, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it? It might be.
Yeah, that's from Universe, I think.
Yeah, somebody correct us if we're wrong in the comments, but she would be the shining star. And if I were to make any actual changes to the main deck itself, I would probably want to throw her in as either a 61st slot or experiment with only 3 Aunt and then one of the Spider Girl, because to evade her whenever you wanted to, and to make another character's text box just blank, as a trait, like as something that you can just activate, is really strong. Like really, really, really strong. I think that's a fantastic card. 1 Mr. Sinister, right? And then 2 copies of Messiah Complex. We lose against burn decks. So, you're going to want a sideboard. If your whole play group is playing burn and you don't want to switch decks, you're going to need to, before you go over there, you're going to need to swap some cards out. So I think that's a solid list for a sideboard. That's what I would have to answer your question.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you for that. Okay. And then another question we have is, how do you deal with your opponent playing Galactus as well? Is it just dependent on who has the odd initiative?
It's not actually. The Galactus play is kind of tricky. So I'm going to give you some advice for Galactus.
Okay.
For any of our listeners, readers, or viewers, or whatever.
Well, I guess we could have readers because they're reading on YouTube. Like, I guess
yeah.
in theory, but I don't know.
So, all right. Here's the Galactus trick. Galactus can be pathetic attempted. Okay.
Yep.
And if you know that you're playing against the mirror matchup or another stall deck, do not take odd initiative. Just don't do it. It's not a good idea. And the reason why is because what you're going to do is you're going to let the opponent play their Galactus, and then you are going to turn around and play your Galactus second because you are not on the initiative.
Right.
And when you play your Galactus second, you get to drain double the life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they just drained your life, added it to theirs. You just drained that whole total back and added it to yours.
Right.
Another trick is if you play Galactus and I pathetic attempt it, then I play Galactus and you pathetic attempt me. Then what we are running into is there's another trick that you can do where you run your Galactus into their Galactus, and if they're a bad player, they're going to recover their Galactus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can actually choose not to recover any character. Every recovery phase, you can choose not to recover any character. And this is important for Aunt May and Puppet Master because they probably won't stun any of your characters, right? So you run Aunt May and Puppet Master into your opponent, and you can just choose not to recover anything. And they both just die, right? So
and just to be clear, when you choose not to recover, if you have like 3 stun characters, you do not recover any of them. So it's not like you can choose to recover. Like, if you choose not to recover, all your stun characters are being KO'd.
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
Correct. And so same with Galactus. So if you run Galactus in, they might recover thinking that they're going to beat you for 25 next turn and win. That's not the case. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is your Galactus is going to get KO'd because you chose not to recover anything, and you're going to use Slaughter Swamp, Soul World, or Avalon Space Station to bring your Galactus back and re-recruit it on turn 10.
Or Messiah Complex if you play it in a Galactus build, obviously.
Yep. Or Messiah Complex. And, by doing that, you re-drain their life, and then they're good to go. Because Galactus probably isn't going to get in on you because you still have all these exhaust effects. So really, that Galactus fight boils down to who goes second, like who has the even initiative, and then who has saved their pathetic attempts, or who has omnipotence. And this is another trap. You omnipotence pathetic attempt.
Okay.
And then you omnipotence with your second omnipotence. You omnipotence like a Have a Blast or Death of the Dream, right?
Right.
So they can't KO anything. And then when they play Galactus, they drain your life. You play Galactus, nothing can be pathetic attempted, and then you win because you play Galactus second. So there's a lot of different variants. So you'll play against Green Lantern stall, X-Men stall. Like, there's a bunch of stall decks that win by Galactus. Heralds of Galactus.
And if you guys want to see what a Green Lantern deck looks like, look at my latest video on YouTube, and I have a Green Lantern deck profile. Sorry, I had to plug that in really quick.
No, it's all good. No, it's all good. But yeah, that's my advice for fighting the Galactus mirror matchup for sure. Any Galactus build,
and
that's what you're trying to do.
I just thought of a combo when you were talking about Galactus. So one potential combo you can do is if they drain you with Galactus, and let's say you're at 0, right? You can actually Messiah Complex and boost the effects so you can gain endurance and potentially go on to another turn.
Absolutely.
That's another thing I just thought about.
And that's why I think Messiah Complex deserves a slot in the sideboard as well. And I actually forgot to mention that. Thank you for reminding me about that. I've had games in Galactus mirror matchups where I intentionally waited after they Galactused me. They pathetic attempted my Galactus, right? And so now we've got 2 Galactuses. I stall them all out. I'm at 0 endurance. I use the Messiah Complex. I gain 9 endurance, right? Or I gain 8 endurance or 7 or even 4. And then now I live another turn. I run my Galactus into his Galactus, and then I recur my Galactus and recast it, and I'm good to go.
I just thought of an on-the-fly question I'm going to throw out at you, and this might be a regular question we going forward with our podcast episodes, but
sure.
Okay, so if you got to bring back 4 copies of any one banned card for your Spider Stall deck, what would it be?
Oh my goodness.
And you can play 4 copies of it, but it could be only one. And I'm going to chime in on this too. I already have my answer. But I want to compare our answers to see if we're the same.
Any band card. Oh man, that would be a tough one. Man, four copies of any band card. I would probably say that it would have to be. Oh man, I don't even know. The deck would change, but
Yeah.
I mean, a Doctor Light would be would be
Oh,
pretty cool. I mean, yeah, I would have to revamp the deck, but I would make something gnarly out of Doctor Light and
you know,
still make it Spider.
I didn't even think about Dr. Light, but my answer was Overload.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Overload. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
Overload's
mean, especially for like if you're playing against Mega City and they just start cashing in on all their cards, you
yeah.
just go Overload.
Oh yeah, Overload would be great.
All right, okay, I think that wraps it up for this episode. Jacob, is there anything you want to add before we conclude it here?
No, man, it's it's an honor to be on this show, and yeah, I hope the viewers and listeners and readers are all really enjoying the content, and I think I speak for both of us when I'd say that I'd love to hear what the community thinks, and if you rage over the Spider-Man Ultimates thing, let us know, tell us off, like.
And if you rage about sideboards, we want to know too. If you guys are angry every time you hear the word sideboard in a Versus System podcast.
Friends don't let friends sideboard.
Yes, exactly. And so I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about before we end it, what are we going to talk about next time? So I feel that, you wanted to do the Mega City for the first podcast. I chose Spider Stall for the second podcast. I think we should come to an agreement on the next deck that we talk about. And
Okay.
I think I got a couple of requests from friends and other people that they want to see either Doctor Doom or the Brotherhood. So what do you think would be a good choice?
The Brotherhood would be great. I mean, there's some fantastic top Golden Age material list for the Brotherhood.
Okay.
I'm okay with either one. I'm in agreement with both. But
And I'm assuming the Doctor Doom deck is the Crisis Doom, right? For Golden Age?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I don't think it's up there in like the best decks. It's still it's a very good deck, and it will absolutely ruin your kitchen table experience.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
It's
I do have a Doom deck myself, but we also have a guy in our play group that plays Doom, and it just gets really annoying when you have the 4-drop and the 6-drop out, and you can't play plot twists anymore.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So yeah, let's shoot for Brotherhood next time.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that'll be it for this episode of the podcast. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to this to wherever we post the podcast, which we haven't decided yet, make sure to let us know the feedback, what you guys think about it. And I'm gonna end it at that, and we will see you all next time.
Later, guys.